March 1941. Lyon, Vichy, France. The Rhone moves slowly beneath low gray light, carrying no secrets, pretending nothing has changed. The streets are intact. Cafes still open their doors. Church bells still mark the hours. But the air is heavier now, thick with whispers, with eyes that linger too long, with names that vanish between dusk and dawn. In a narrow apartment overlooking a tram line, a man stands by the window without touching the glass. He does not smoke. He does not pace. He listens. Below him, boots pass on stone. A cart rattles. Somewhere, a radio hums softly before going silent again. He commits none of it to paper. He commits all of it to memory. German intelligence believes Lyon is calm, orderly, managed. That belief will become their greatest mistake. The occupation does not announce itself with gunfire here. It arrives with paperwork, with permits stamped in blue ink, with meetings held behind closed doors and uniforms that move confidently through public squares. Control, the Germans believe, is achieved through visibility, through fear made visible. And yet something is wrong. Rail schedules no longer align with intercepted plans. Arrests come up empty. Entire networks dissolve before they can be seized, as if warned by instinct alone. Messages arrive already obsolete. The resistance is not louder. It is quieter, and therefore harder to see. German reports begin to change in tone. Not panicked, confused. They write of leaks, of unreliable informants, of unexpected awareness. The language circles the truth without touching it. Someone, somewhere, is listening more than speaking. He moves through the city as a clerk might, or a teacher, or a man with no reason to be noticed. His coat is unremarkable. His shoes worn but clean. He carries papers he never needs to show. His strength is not disguise, but restraint. In cafes, he takes the same seat, near the wall, back to the room. He orders the same drink, says nothing beyond politeness. He watches hands more than faces. A tremor in the fingers, a pause before a reply, a glance toward the door at the wrong moment. Information, he knows, is not found. It is felt. The resistance in Lyon is young, fragmented, courageous but fragile. They lack weapons. They lack training. They lack certainty. What they have is proximity to rail yards, to factories, to offices where lists are typed and retyped until they decide who belongs and who disappears. They also have him. He never gives orders loudly, never speaks of ideology. He asks questions as if uncertain. He listens as if unconcerned. And when he leaves a room, he takes with him the shape of what was said and what was not. German intelligence officers begin to sense a distortion in the city, like sound traveling through fog. Their methods remain the same. Interrogations, surveillance, informants paid in food and fear. But the resistance does not respond as expected. Cells vanish before raids. Messages stop mid-sentence. Trains are missed not through sabotage, but absence. Nothing explodes. No one claims credit. And yet the machine grinds unevenly. The man keeps no written records. He trusts no single source. He cross-checks everything in his head, like chalk lines drawn and erased on an invisible board. His memory becomes an archive, addresses, routines, minor habits. Who lights a cigarette before answering? Who never removes their gloves? Who suddenly begins to talk too much? At night, alone, the wait arrives. He sits at a small table beneath a shaded lamp. He washes his hands carefully, as if the city itself might leave residue. He thinks of faces he has memorized, knowing some will not survive the year. He does not allow himself to imagine outcomes. He focuses only on accuracy. Accuracy keeps people alive. In April, a courier does not arrive. No body is found. No arrest announced. The Germans assume success. The resistance assumes betrayal. Panic threatens to unravel months of quiet discipline. The man intervenes, not with reassurance, but with clarity. He isolates the moment. The last meeting, the last deviation from routine. He recognizes the flaw not as malice, but impatience. A single unnecessary conversation. A name spoken too early. He adjusts the network like a surgeon correcting a heartbeat. Weeks later, German intelligence intercepts a message that leads nowhere. A safe house searched hours too late. Another report is filed. Another question mark added in the margins. They suspect a mastermind, a commander, someone issuing orders from the shadows. They are wrong. There is no mastermind, only attention. The climax comes without ceremony. A list, typed in duplicate, is scheduled to move from a prefecture office to Gestapo headquarters. Names of dock workers, printers, students, the kind of list that ends lives quietly. The man hears of it not through resistance channels, but through a hesitation. A clerk who mentions tomorrow instead of today. A voice that drops when saying the destination. Enough to know, enough to act. He does not attempt theft. That would draw attention. Instead, he delays. A question asked at the right desk. A phone call rerouted. A stamp misplaced. Bureaucracy turned gently against itself. The list arrives late. Too late. By the time German officers act, half the names have already disappeared into anonymity. Changed addresses, altered routines. People who wake up and decide not to go to work that day without knowing why. The Germans never discover how close they came. By summer, Lion is labeled unstable. Not hostile, not rebellious. Simply unreliable. Resources are shifted elsewhere. Attention moves to louder fires. The blind spot remains. The man does not celebrate. He never allows himself that luxury. He knows the cost is cumulative. Every evasion buys time, not victory. Every success invites scrutiny. One evening, he pauses on a bridge over the river. The city lights ripple on dark water. Somewhere a train horn sounds, on time for once. He rests his hands on the cold stone and breathes, just once, deeply. He thinks of how history will record this war. Of battles, of speeches, of generals and flags. He knows there will be no chapter for listening, no monument to restraint, no medal for the man who spoke less so others could live more. And perhaps that is the point, because the resistance that survives this year will do so not because it was louder, but because someone understood that power does not always announce itself. Sometimes it observes, sometimes it waits, sometimes it protects by remaining unseen. Lion endures, scarred, compromised, alive. And somewhere in its streets, the echo of a quiet vigilance lingers, reminding us that history is not only shaped by those who act boldly in the light, but by those who choose, patiently, to watch in the dark. June 1941, southern France. The war does not look like war here. The streets are orderly. Trains arrive on time. Typewriters clatter behind office doors. In salons, women sit beneath soft lamps while scissors whisper through hair, and the radio murmurs official assurances that everything is under control. The smell is soap and perfume, not smoke. Paper, not gunpowder. And in that calm, she moves unnoticed. She is neither young nor old, neither striking nor forgettable, at least not in a way that draws attention. Her voice is low, her gestures precise. When spoken to, she listens more than she replies. When ignored, she remembers everything. To the occupying authorities, she is nothing at all. That is her advantage. She passes through spaces men in uniform never linger in long enough to understand. A hair salon near the station, where officers relax and talk freely while mirrors reflect more than faces. A clerical office where lists are copied, recopied, and left unattended for minutes at a time. Train platforms where delays create conversation, and conversation creates carelessness. She does not carry weapons. She carries context. German intelligence believes power flows downward, from command to command, order to order. They believe networks are built with authority and enforced with fear. What they do not understand is how easily information leaks sideways through boredom, vanity, and the human need to be heard. She never asks direct questions. She lets people explain themselves. A junior officer complains about reassignment. A clerk worries about being blamed for missing paperwork. A courier mentions a changed route, annoyed rather than cautious. Each fragment is small. In isolation, meaningless. But in her mind, they arrange themselves like threads pulled slowly into pattern. She has trained herself never to write things down. Names stay attached to habits, voices to moods, lies to timing. She knows who speaks too quickly, who pauses before answering, who enjoys being clever, and who fears being discovered. Memory becomes her map, more reliable than paper, less dangerous than ink. In cafes, she chooses tables near conversations, not participants. On trains, she sits beside windows, letting others speak into the open space she creates by saying nothing. Men mistake her silence for insignificance. Women mistake it for politeness. Both are wrong. By late summer, resistance cells begin to notice something strange. Couriers rerouted without explanation. Meetings postponed just before they are compromised. A suspected traitor exposed not by interrogation, but by absence. His contacts quietly worn away, leaving him isolated and harmless. No one can trace the source. German reports speak of internal instability, of unexpected coordination. They search for radios, for printers, for armed groups. They look for men. They never look at her. She moves through a salon one afternoon as an officer, relaxed and off-duty, jokes about how predictable the French resistance has become. They think themselves clever, he says, watching his reflection. But they all follow patterns. She smiles faintly, as if amused by the remark. Later, she will remember the specific phrasing he used. The casual way he mentioned a meeting location not yet compromised. The name of a colleague who laughed too loudly. Patterns work both ways. The danger is constant, but rarely dramatic. It arrives in glances held a moment too long, in sudden silence when she enters a room, in the weight of knowing that one misstep, a question asked too early, a pause too late, could collapse everything. At night, alone, she rehearses faces in her mind like a litany. She reviews routes, timetables, who knows whom, and who pretends not to. She sleeps lightly, not from fear, but from discipline. Dreams are a luxury she cannot afford. Her restraint saves lives. When a courier is compromised, she does not warn him directly. That would reveal too much. Instead, she adjusts the environment, redirects information so his contacts stop appearing, ensures he never receives critical details. He fades from relevance without understanding why. When a traitor sells names for safety, she does not confront him. She lets the network reorganize around him until he is exposed by contradiction alone. His stories failing to align, his confidence eroding under scrutiny he cannot see. The resistance begins to change shape. Less centralized, more fluid, harder to penetrate. Those at the top believe this evolution is strategic genius. They speak of leadership and planning. She never corrects them. The climax comes quietly, as these things always do. A courier network operating between Lyon and Marseille has become dangerously efficient. Too efficient. German intelligence uses it not only to intercept messages, but to feed false ones back into resistance channels. Entire operations are being nudged toward failure without ever realizing they were compromised. She senses it through absence again. Meetings that should happen, but do not. Messages that arrive too neatly. People who seem informed without knowing how. She traces the distortion backward, not by force, but by patience. One station, one office, one desk where a clerk has begun staying late, where papers are handled out of sequence, where someone suddenly knows more than their position allows. She does nothing at first. Then, carefully she misdirects. A whisper here, a suggestion there. Routes are altered. Couriers arrive early or late. False confidence is allowed to grow on the German side, even as the ground beneath them shifts. Within weeks, the network collapses, not with arrests but with irrelevance. Messages fail to reach anyone important. Informants are fed truths that no longer matter. German intelligence declares the operation successful and moves resources elsewhere. They never realized the source of their failure was not sabotage, but invisibility. By autumn, her name is known only to a handful of people, and even then, not fully. Some call her cautious. Others underestimate her role entirely. That is fine. She has learned that recognition is often the enemy of survival. She continues to move, continues to listen. continues to adjust the flow of information like a hand on a dimmer switch. Never off, never fully on. When the war ends, if she survives it, there will be no photograph. No file thick with reports. No moment that history can easily point to and say, here, this mattered. But trains will have been missed. Lists delayed. Lives rerouted into survival rather than silence. And somewhere beneath the noise of history, beneath the speeches and parades and monuments, her work will remain like a whisper that never needed to become a shout. Because power does not always belong to those who command a room. Sometimes it belongs to the woman everyone forgot to watch. August 1944. Paris is breathing again. The sound comes first. Not cheers, but movement. Boots running without fear. Doors opening all at once. Windows thrown wide as if the city itself has been holding its breath for 4 years and finally exhales. Smoke still hangs in the air, but now it smells of burned paper instead of surrender. Files are carried into courtyards. Cabinets tipped onto cobblestones. Names, codes, dates. Entire lives reduced to stacks of paper feeding open flames. Some are destroyed in panic, others with intention. History is being edited in real time. Inside a government office reclaimed almost too quickly, men argue over credit. Who coordinated which cells? Who authorized what? Whose version will survive the telling? She is not present for any of it. She stands several streets away, watching ash settle along the curb like gray snow. Her coat is the same one she has worn for years. Her posture unchanged. Liberation does not alter her habits. She has learned that noise is temporary, but records endure, and records are disappearing. Her work, what little of it ever existed on paper, is sealed, misfiled, or quietly removed. Methods labeled unofficial. Channels described as informal. Intelligence deemed unreliable because it does not trace cleanly back to authority. There is no space for her in the reports. Paris celebrates with flags and gunfire into the air. Bells ring until their sound overlaps and dissolves into something like chaos. The war is not over, but this chapter is. And chapters, she knows, are written by those who speak loudest when the moment arrives. She walks through the city without being stopped. No one asks her name. No one thanks her. She moves through crowds that do not see her, just as she has always done. This, too, is familiar. In the days that follow, committees form. Archives are reviewed. Heroism is categorized. There is a hunger for clarity, clear villains, clear victories, clean lines of cause and effect. Stories that fit on plaques. Her work does not fit. It relied on memory rather than documents, on absence rather than action, on restraint rather than command. There are no orders signed in her hand, no operations bearing her name, only outcomes, train schedules altered, arrests that never happened, networks that fail without anyone ever knowing why. That kind of success makes people uneasy, so it is explained away. Someone says the resistance simply became more careful. Someone else credits chance. Another attributes it to atmospheric confusion within German intelligence. No one mentions her. She is asked once to give an account. A brief interview conducted by a man already distracted, already thinking ahead to his next appointment. She answers carefully, minimally. She does not embellish. She does not defend herself. When he asks for documentation, she tells him there is none. The file is closed within minutes. At night, she sits alone in a small room that no longer requires blackout curtains. Light spills freely onto the floor. She isn't used to it. For years, illumination meant danger. Now it feels almost intrusive. She thinks of the people who will not return, of names she never learned fully, of voices that disappeared without warning. Liberation does not bring them back. It does not resolve the quiet arithmetic of loss she has carried for so long. She has survived, but survival has its own cost. Weeks pass, then months. The machinery of peace begins to resemble the machinery of war. Bureaucratic, confident, eager to simplify. Intelligence agencies reorganize. New doctrines are written. Methods are standardized. Her approach is never adopted. It cannot be taught easily. It depends too much on patience, on intuition, on the willingness to remain invisible even when recognition is offered. Institutions prefer clarity. They prefer control. They prefer names. Her absence becomes complete. Not erased, just omitted. She does not protest. She understands something others do not yet see. That acknowledgement would have required explanation, and explanation would have revealed vulnerabilities no one wants examined. It is easier to forget her than to confront the truth her work implies. That wars are not only won by force. That intelligence does not always require authority. That some victories depend entirely on those who are never meant to matter. Paris rebuilds. Plaques are mounted. Streets renamed. Children are taught which heroes to admire. The narrative settles into place, firm and reassuring. And beneath it all, an uncomfortable silence remains. Because somewhere within the liberation's success lies a paradox. Entire enemy networks collapsed without decisive battles, without celebrated commanders, without any single moment history can point to and say this is where it turned. Only absence, only prevention, only listening. She leaves Paris quietly. No farewell, no destination announced. The war has taught her how little permanence exists in geography. What matters is movement, knowing when to stay, when to vanish. Years later, researchers will stumble over inconsistencies, gaps in German reports, operations that failed for reasons never fully explained. They will suspect coincidence, or incompetence, or luck. They will not find her. And that, perhaps, is the final truth. History remembers what it can categorize. It celebrates what it can name. But some of the most decisive forces move beyond the reach of record, working in the margins, between conversations, inside moments no one thought important enough to write down. She never fired a shot, never signed an order, never stood beneath a flag. Yet lives been away from death because she noticed what others ignored. And if her name is missing from the books, if her victory came without applause, that absence carries its own quiet meaning. Because sometimes the most powerful act in war is not to be heard at all, but to ensure that others live long enough to speak.